And you can see each annual layer from the melting and refreezing. So they can go back in a lot of these mountain glaciers 1,000 years. And they constructed a thermometer of the temperature. The blue is cold and the red is warm. Now, I show this for a couple of reasons. Number one, the so-called skeptics will sometimes say, oh, this whole thing, this is a cyclical phenomenon. There was a medieval warming period after all. Well, yeah, there was. There it is right there. There are two others. But compared to what's going on now, there's just no comparison. So if you look at 1,000 years worth of temperature and compare it to 1,000 years of CO2, you can see how closely they fit together. Now, 1,000 years of CO2 in the mountain glaciers, that's one thing. But in Antarctica, they can go back 650,000 years. This, incidentally, is the first time anybody outside of a small group of scientists has seen this image. This is the present day era, and that's the last ice age. Then it goes up. We're going back in time now, 650,000 years. That's the period of warming between the last two ice ages. That's the second and third ice age back, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh ice age back. Now, an important point. In all of this time, 650,000 years, the CO2 level has never gone above 300 parts per million. Now, as I said, they can also measure temperature. Here's what the temperature has been on our Earth. Now, one thing that kind of jumps out at you is, well, let me put it this way. If my classmate from the 6th grade that talked about Africa and South America were here, he would say, did they ever fit together? Most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But they did, of course. And the relationship is actually very complicated. But there is one relationship that is far more powerful than all the others, and it is this. When there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets warmer because it traps more heat from the sun inside. In the parts of the United States that contain the modern cities of Cleveland, Detroit, New York, in the northern tier, this is the difference between a nice day and having a mile of ice over your head. Keep that in mind when you look at this fact. Carbon dioxide, having never gone above 300 parts per million, here is where CO2 is now. Way above where it's ever been as far back as this record will measure. Now, if you'll bear with me, I want to really emphasize this point. The crew here has tried to teach me how to use this contraption here, so if I don't kill myself, I'll... It's already right here. Look how far above the natural cycle this is, and we've done that. But ladies and gentlemen, in the next 50 years, really in less than 50 years, it's going to continue to go up. When some of these children who are here are my age, here's what it's going to be in less than 50 years. You've heard of off the charts. Within less than 50 years, it'll be here. There's not a single fact or date or number that's been used to make this up that's in any controversy. The so-called skeptics look at this and they say, so? That seems perfectly okay. Well, again, if on the temperature side, if this much on the cold side is a mile of ice over our heads, what would that much on the warm side be? Ultimately, this is really not a political issue so much as a moral issue. If we allow that to happen, it is deeply unethical.
I had such faith in our democratic system, our self-government. I actually thought and believed that the story would be compelling enough to cause a real sea change in the way that Congress reacted to that issue. I thought they would be startled too. And they weren't.
The struggles, the victories that aren't really victories, the defeats that aren't really defeats, they can serve to magnify the significance of some trivial step forward, exaggerate the seeming importance of some massive setback. April 3rd, 1989. My son pulled loose from my hand and chased his friend across the street. He was 6 years old. The machine was breathing for him. We were possibly going to lose him. He finally took a breath. We stayed in the hospital for a month. It was almost as if you could look at that calendar and just go, and everything just flew off. It's trivial, insignificant. He was so brave. He was such a brave guy. Just turned my whole world upside down and then shook it until everything fell out. My way of being in the world, it just changed everything for me. How should I spend my time on this earth? I really dug in, trying to learn about it much more deeply. I went to Antarctica, went to the South Pole, the North Pole, the Amazon, went to places where scientists could help me understand parts of the issue that I didn't really understand in depth. The possibility of losing what was most precious to me. I gained an ability that maybe I didn't have before, but when I felt it, I felt that we could really lose it. That what we take for granted might not be here for our children.
These are actual measurements of atmospheric temperature since our Civil War. In any given year, it might look like it's going down, but the overall trend is extremely clear. And in recent years, it's uninterrupted and it is intensifying. In fact, if you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured in this atmospheric record, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. We have already seen some of the heat waves that are similar to what scientists are saying are going to be a lot more common. A couple of years ago in Europe, they had that massive heat wave that killed 35,000 people. India didn't get as much attention, but the same year the temperature there went to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. This past summer in the American West, there were a lot of cities that broke all-time records for high temperatures and number of consecutive days with 100-degree temperature or more. 200 cities and towns in the West set all-time records. And in the East, there were a lot of cities that did the same thing, including, incidentally, New Orleans. So the temperature increases are taking place all over the world, including in the oceans. This is the natural range of variability for temperature in the oceans. You know, people say, oh, it's just natural.